What is your most messed up first date experience? Story 1. Was invited over to a woman's house after a heavy night of drinking. We started tearing each other's clothes off the moment we walked in. Proceeded to the bedroom and went to town on each other. She was quite the screamer. Come morning, I wake to her then 4-year-old daughter entering the room asking, "Is Daddy home?" As it turns out, this woman was separated from her husband prior to filing for a divorce, screamed like mad while we were sleeping together with her daughter in the next room, and was living at her in-laws' house. The second this woman rushed her daughter out of the room, I got dressed, crawled out of the first-floor window in the bathroom, and ran like heck to my car without looking back. Never look back. On the plus side, I managed to add and immediately scratch off a few things on my bucket list. That's quite a story. I mean, who doesn't love a good one-night stand, right? But the fact that the woman was separated from her husband and living at her in-laws' house is already a flag. And to top it off, she had her daughter in the next room while you two were going at it like rabbits. That's just wow. Story 2. I was a sophomore in high school. I had recently received my license. This was significant because I had been talking to this girl for a while and could finally pick her up and take her out on a date. When I went to knock on her door, her 2 brothers, both of whom were older than me and went to my high school, all-boys prep school, answered the door completely bare-butt naked. They invited me in and asked me to sit and watch TV on the couch with them. The 5 minutes it took for her to get ready were the longest, most awkward 5 minutes of my life. Her brothers proceeded to ask me questions about whether or not I wanted to get naked with them. Why was I acting so weird and smiling? It's a shame that her brothers felt the need to act that way, especially when you were there to take their sister out on a date. I hope that the rest of your date went well and that you were able to have a good time despite the initial awkwardness. At least it makes for a good story to tell in the future. Story 3. Oh man, freshman year in high school, first date ever, we went to a movie. My first warning sign was that he smelled like body odor when he put his arm around me. He was just awkward and strange in general, but we didn't interact much because of the movie. His dad picked us up from the theater. The dude knew that the child window locks in the car were engaged and purposefully farted to test me. I remember violently gagging, his dad unlocking the locks. The first recorded instance of a teenager embarrassing a dad. A classic case of first date disaster, folks. I mean, we've all been there, right? Freshman year, nerves are high, hormones are raging, and BO is in full effect. It's like a rite of passage. The unsung hero of the story, the dad. Can we all take a moment to appreciate the sheer embarrassment this man must have felt? I mean, his son just let one rip in front of his date, and he had to unlock the child locks to save the poor girl's nostrils. First dates can be a total disaster, but at least we can look back and laugh at them, right? Story 4. Went out with this guy who seemed totally normal at first. We went to dinner and then he suggested going to play pool. Okay, sure. So he's driving us to the dive bar he likes that has pool tables and casually mentions, "You're so cute. I could just kidnap you and keep you forever." I was young and stupid and thought, he's totally joking. We played pool at this crappy place, and then he goes to drive me home and mentions again how much he'd like to kidnap me, going into details on how he'd do it. Luckily, he took me home and I didn't talk to him ever again, so no kidnapping occurred. Oh, he also mentioned a few times how he loved my Jewish name and how his parents would love it if he finally brought home a Jew. I was not Jewish. I told him that more than once. It was a really terrible date. Story 5. I went out with a Tinder girl who was about 30 pounds heavier than her photos, was hung up bragging about a band she was in 15 years ago, had 3 triple vodkas, and spilled the third everywhere, just as she was telling me that Jackie O, in fact, was the one that shot JFK. Oh, and then after I somewhat abruptly ended our date, she texted me accidentally instead of her friend and gave her full appraisal of me. Story 6. So we met through a mutual friend, and he told me that he liked me. We were both going to this concert on Valentine's Day, and the plan was that we would meet there and hang out. I remember getting all dressed up and feeling really excited. So I arrived with my group of friends to the meeting spot, and he's there, but acting distant, like he barely knows me. Turns out he had a girlfriend who insisted that she go to the concert with him, and when I arrived, she was standing right there. She promptly looked me up and down with the dismissive stare, and then took his hand and turned away. Needless to say, I felt really bad, and the worst was that I had to endure the entire concert with my other friends before going home and crawling into bed. I really hate Valentine's Day. This is like a scene straight out of a rom-com, except, without the happy ending. I mean, who hasn't been in a situation where they're all dressed up and ready for a date, only to find out that their crush is taken? It's like a punch in the gut. Even though this girl had a terrible Valentine's Day experience, she's still a total badass for enduring the entire concert with her friends and not letting this guy's girlfriend get the best of her. Story 7. I was kind of talking to a girl for a while, and she invited me out for a weekend with all of her friends. We drove about 80 miles away from our area, and I didn't know a single person there. When we got to the hotel, she just left me in a room full of people I didn't know. I walk out of the room and see her boning one of the guys from her group of friends out in the parking lot, in the back of a car. I had to call my mom and ask for money just so I could get my own room. She then asked if her and some of the other people could crash in my room so that they didn't all have to share just one. Edit. I didn't leave because I didn't drive there. And yes, I told her to F off. Story 8. Dateline 1983, San Francisco. I met a girl in a small bookstore. We seemed to hit it off, so I asked her out. She took me to a nearby ATM to get some cash for dinner, and she and her partner tried to rob me. They had been having some success with the setup over the summer, so the San Francisco Police Department was watching ATMs in the area and arrested them both. I spent the night at the police station being interviewed and writing my statement. No dinner, no first date whoopee, and the shop sold the book I wanted. Story 9. I was mostly all right. I'd consider myself pretty awkward, so I've always had a lot of leniency for others who might be as well. Maybe he was shy too. We both seemed to be having a good time. Well, the bill comes, he grabs it. He pauses for a moment, without opening the sleeve, says, "I'll pay if I can shave your body." I was stunned briefly. That's more of a second day proposition, right? But he takes my silence as, "I'm considering it, please continue with more detail." It didn't have to be sensual if I didn't want it. Whew! And he'd gladly pay cash for the less socially acceptable places to shave. He has eyebrows as an example. But really, the goal was to shave every hair off, head to toe. Excuse me? Oh, he has a shave fetish. Funny how that didn't come up until now. Thanks for clarifying. I paid my half and noped right out of there. Ooh, wow, talk about a first date curveball. I mean, you're there having a good time, and then out of nowhere, your date drops the bomb that he wants to shave your body. There's being open-minded, and then there's being taken advantage of. It's always important to set your boundaries and stick to them. And who knows, maybe she'll find someone on her next date who's into something a little less hairy. Story 10. The guy was super baked and kept complimenting me on the cute wrinkles on my toes. His brain was probably going, "Oh, frick, you thought you could do this?" Story 11. A girl who I was friends with on Facebook messaged me out of the blue saying she saw me in public at a shopping mall. So we started talking and decided to meet up at a bar for drinks. When I showed up, she was already sitting at a booth with two men. We acknowledge each other from a distance, and she texts me saying, "Save me." A couple minutes go by, and she finally gets up and walks over to me as I'm standing at the bar. We were having some decent conversation when about 3 minutes later, another guy shows up and she introduces him by his name. He just sort of hung around and bought us drinks for the next hour as I stood there talking to my date. Turns out it was her boyfriend that was hanging out with us. She felt the need to tell me afterwards out of guilt. Story 12. Met this guy on Yahoo Chat. We chatted twice for a total of 45 minutes. He asks me out. We met at the mall. We ate at Garfield's. We walked around the mall. He kept asking me to go into stores, and then he would try to kiss me. But he would try to make it real theatrical by grabbing the back of my head, looking in my eyes, and saying, "Dang it, I'm sorry, but I love you." After the second store, I quit going into stores with him. He tried it about 6 more times. We went to see Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He kept trying to hold my hand. He leaned over a couple times and whispered, "I love you," in my ear. He yelled comments at the movie a lot. After the movie, he asked me to go back to his place and watch the movie Spaceballs, drink wine, and see how lucky I could get. Then he winked. I said, "No, thank you." Never talked to him again. Let's start with the whole theatrical kissing thing. I mean, sure, it's cute in movies, but in real life, it's just cringeworthy. And the fact that he kept trying to do it in stores, of all places, that's just a recipe for disaster. It's like he's trying to audition for a role in a cheesy romance movie. Story 13. I went on a date with this guy. After dinner, we went back to his apartment to hang out. I went to the bathroom. When I came back out, he was pleasuring himself on the couch. I made a beeline for the front door and never saw or spoke to him again. He didn't say anything either. Only works 2/3 of the time. Story 14. For a while, I had my OkCupid profile that I would accept any reasonably pitched invitation to a date. This led to many bad dates. A notably bad one. Guy invites me to a party. I ask a few questions, but he's kind of vague. Tells me to dress nice. It ends up being a religious family holiday. He told his family I was his girlfriend. I went with it. You're a champ for playing along. Story 15. I went on a date with a guy, and let's just call him James. He decided that we'd go for a picnic, and I was really excited. James calls to tell me to drive to his house, and from there we'll go to this park that's about 5 minutes from his house, but 15 from mine. When I get there, he tells me that he packed food already, but I need to drive because he didn't want to waste gas. After we set out, he gets us lost. I've never driven to this park, so I don't know the way. Eventually, we make with a drive that should have been 5 minutes, was 20. Still, no gas money about that. We get there and we eat, but all he packed were slices of ham, some bread, and a slice of cheese. Nothing else and no drinks. After we eat, he tells me to rub his back, and I thought, if I give him a back rub, he'll give me one, so I did. After 20 minutes of back rubbing, he turns to me and says, "Wake me up in 20, and proceeds to fall asleep. I mean, first of all, who goes on a picnic and only packs ham, bread, and cheese? That's like the bare minimum. Where are the fruits, the veggies, the fancy cheeses? Come on, James, step up your picnic game. But then there's the whole gas situation. I mean, really, you make the girl drive because you don't want to waste gas, and then you get lost and make her drive even more? That's just not cool, man. At least offer to chip in for gas money or something. Story 16. The girl didn't know it was a date. Story 17. I was only 16 and it was my first date ever. He came to my house to watch movies. After watching a horror film, we got on the topic of ghosts and paranormal stuff. I told him how my great-grandmother had passed away in my home. He proceeded to talk about how he was possessed once. Then he went on to pretend that he was being possessed by my great-grandmother. Just the thought of this still makes me cringe, badly. Story 18. Met a guy online and thought he was cool, so met up with him for a coffee. I kissed him on the cheek to say hello, which he took as an opportunity to stick his tongue down my throat and go for a boobaloobalooby grab. I pulled back, and he yelled at me, "Is it because I'm a retard?" in front of a packed cafe. He had a hearing aid. I left pretty quickly after that. Story 19. I went on a date with a guy who seemed pretty confident and stable during the entire time together. We went to the movies, and then he dropped me at home. He ended the date by kissing me and telling me he loved me. Classic Schmosby, confident and stable, cool, dropped me home. Well, that's polite. Kissed me. If it was going well, then why not? Told me he loved me. Story 20. I once passed a kidney stone the morning before a first date I had scheduled. I showed up to the day half stoned on Vicodin the doctor prescribed me for the pain. It must have been a pretty fun date since she eventually married me. Story 21. The most messed up, I would say, is the one time I was on a date with someone and didn't know it. I said I was cool with hanging out, and apparently she decided to take that as, I want to go on a date. So we just were hanging at my place, playing some video games, and that was it. I mean, literally, video games and chill. Not long after, I was told by someone else that she told them that we went out on a date. Movie, restaurant, my place, intimate stuff that night. As it turns out, she's a complete psycho. Quickly squashed that friendship, and she didn't take it too well. Oh, this girl sounds like a total psycho. I mean, not only did she completely misinterpret the situation, but she also went around telling people that they went on a full-blown date, complete with restaurant and a boning. It's like she's living in some alternate reality. Story 22. Oh, once I went on a date with a guy that went really well, until he took me to his apartment afterward. He had a dog that had literally pooped all over his bathroom, and he didn't clean it up. I had to step over all this poop to get to the toilet, and it was all disgusting. Then his dog ate my necklace and chewed up my shoe. 2 months later, he impregnated a girl with the same name as me. It isn't a common spelling. That's what happens when you wear a macaroni necklace. Story 23. Talking about neighborhoods, and this girl brought up how there was, quote, too many blacks here. That was my second week in Portland, Oregon. City is not as progressive as the locals like to pretend it is. Whoa, what the F, man? Just because there are too many blacks in Portland, Oregon, doesn't mean it's not progressive. God, racist much? Story 24. She attempted to take her own life after I dropped her off. She survived, but I haven't dated since. Maybe you were so great she wanted to end her life on a positive note because no guy would ever be able to compare to you. Story 25. Not myself, but here's a story. Me and my friend were hanging out and wanted to invite the whole gang over and hit up Korean barbecue. One of our friends, let's call him Steven, said he was busy that night and had a date set up. Of course, he was super stoked and was acting like he was hot poop because of it. Then another friend, let's call him Joe, also had to bail because he had plans with a girl. Joe was talking all about how he was going to get some wussy tonight and that the girl was a 10, and he was stoked. Turns out Joe and Steven both show up to our house at the same time, look at each other, and are really freaking confused. It's been a while, and they still get ticked off whenever we mention their date together. These two guys were acting like they were hot stuff because they had dates. I mean, come on, guys, it's 2023. We should all know by now that boasting about getting laid isn't cool. And let's not forget the fact that they both bailed on Korean barbecue to go on these dates. Priorities, people. Story 26. It was high school. She asked me to meet her friends. I met her friends. She began making out with her ex, who was with her friends. She ended it, you mean. Story 27. Went to dinner with a guy. He proceeded to get really drunk and started telling me he wants me to meet his mother and take me on holidays. Just really over-the-top stuff, considering I'd only met him a couple of hours ago. Not too messed up, but super awkward. Story 28. My date picked me up so we can go out to dinner, and on the way there, we passed a deer that had been struck by a car and had its life ended in someone's front lawn. He pulls his truck over, gets out, and, with a handsaw, saws the deer's head off while two children look on, crying and screaming in horror. Story 29. Date read a book the entire time we were on the date, had the gall to ask me why I wasn't being so talkative. I'm a guy, date was a girl. Story 30. I met a guy on OkCupid. He seemed pretty cool. We had a lot of the same interests. He invited me to a barbecue during the day, which I thought would be a very nice first date. When I arrived, I immediately discovered it was a baby shower. Okay, I was like, babies, whatever. It was his ex-girlfriend's baby shower. And you guessed it, it was his baby. I asked him what the frick I was doing there, and he admitted that he wanted to make her jealous. I left after being there for 10 minutes, but not before his ex-girlfriend asked me how much he paid me to be there. Then he texted and called me every day for a week. Looks like we've got a winner here. Who wouldn't want to go on a baby shower first date? It's like the perfect mix of awkward and uncomfortable. I think this girl made the right call by leaving after only 10 minutes. Who needs that kind of drama in their life? And let's hope this guy finds a more appropriate way to deal with his ex-girlfriend jealousy issues in the future. Story 31. My first date ever in life, took a guy out to lunch. His friend randomly shows up, sits down, and orders food. They start texting each other, then randomly get up and leave, sticking me with the bill. I found out later that they wanted to bone. Story 32. Me. So, what do you do in your spare time? Her. I volunteer at an old folks' home for people with dementia. Me, having a grandmother with dementia. Oh wow, that's great. Thank you for... Her. Yeah, I really like laughing at them. Well, this is over. Story 33. He brought his cousin, took me to see Jack and Jill, then kissed me behind a clothing rack in Urban Outfitters. Story 34. I went in for a kiss and she hugged me. Messed me up. We even held hands for the whole movie. She knew she was just letting you down nicely. A hug misunderstanding is a million times more bearable than, ew, no. Story 35. Went on a date with a guy I met via the gay dating app, threw up a lot of red flags, discussed his antidepressants, a previous abusive partner, told the story about how he hit a bird with his car while driving, had to stop to clean the gore off. Shortly after we met up, he suggested we ditch my plan of a simple lunch, take a train to his car, go for a drive in the mountains. Told me he hated the thought of someone not liking him, would do anything to change their mind. Begged me to not go when I tried to end the date. Also, he asked for my star sign, and that was the part that really helped me make up my mind. Typical Capricorn. Oh boy, it sounds like this girl went on a date with a real doozy of a guy. I mean, when someone starts talking about their antidepressants and abusive ex-partners on a first date, that's definitely a red flag. You gotta trust your gut and set boundaries for yourself, especially on a first date. Maybe she'll find someone who's a little less intense on her next date. Story 36. Met this girl on Plenty of Fish. We start chatting back and forth for a few days, and eventually she invites me over to her place. I get there. It's not her place, but a place she's living at the time. The house was a wreck. Reeked to hell. Saw a bunch of unfinished bowls of food, and some had mold. End table next to the couch had a crack pipe on it. Noped out of the house, told her I needed to get my phone charger, got in the car, and booked it out of there. My 1997 Corolla was like an F1 car that day, trying to get out of there.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.